February 2020. Welcome to the Social Work Services Committee. That's gone 10:30. So welcome. If I could just say, this meeting will be recorded and subsequently made available to the public for listening purposes, and also if you could turn off or turn to silent your mobile phones so they don't interrupt the meeting. Thank you very much. Just a small announcement as well. We have a new member on the committee, Councillor McCammon, in place of Councillor McCarruthers, so can thank Councillor Carruthers for his contribution up to now, and welcome Councillor McCammon, who I understand is, however, is an apology for today. Is that correct? Okay. And just on that, if I could get confirmation of the SEDERUNT apologies, please.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yes, we do have an apology from Councillor McCammon. Do members wish to alert me to any other apologies?
Councillor Giusti.
Councillor Ingalls and Councillor Tate are also apologies.
Okay. In that case then, Chair, we have 17 members present at the start of the meeting.
Thank you. And on item 2, do we have any declarations of interest from members of the committee? No, thank you. And to note there, on to item 3, the minute of the previous meeting on 26th of November. This is for noting. Are we happy to do that? Okay, thank you. And that brings us to item 4, the plan for palliative care. And this is under a report by Chief Social Work Officer. We have Liz Forsyth here to speak to the report, I understand. So I think, sorry, Liz and Viv Granton, is it? Both here? Okay, thank you. Just bear with us for a wee technical support issue. Okay, thank you. So just members, obviously we're looking at this report. We're being asked to consider and discuss the plan, and you might be sort of wondering, well, where does this fit in with the bigger scheme of things? So I'm just wondering if Lillian, for the purposes of clarity, our role as a committee here in terms of considering this draft report and capturing maybe members' views.
Thank you, Chair. Members will be aware that under the Health and Social Care Partnership and the governance arrangements, that any plan or proposed way forward, which is decided through the Integrated Joint Board, is brought to members for consultation and consideration. So this plan for palliative care will be presented to the IJB, who has the ultimate governance responsibility for that element of service delivery. However, it is important that myself and representatives from the local authority, as members of the IJB, take back the views, concerns and questions asked by members of the Social Work Committee.
That's great, thank you very much. So is there anything you'd like to add to the report, Viv or Liz, and then I'll throw it open to members for questions.
I don't think so, Chair. I think we're just very happy to have the views of committee on that draft plan that you have in front of you.
Great stuff. Who wants to kick off then? Councillor Giusti.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, how far have the IGB and NHS engaged and consulted with stakeholders, such as Professor David Clark, on this piece of work?
Hi there, thanks for the question. There's been quite a lot of engagement around this particular development of this particular plan through collaboration with Macmillan Improvement Project that gave us a team that were doing that. So we've been out far and wide across Dumfries and Galloway. Professor Clark has shared with us his views around the plan, and we'll be considering them within, as we do all the others, as we move to finalise that plan.
Councillor Murray.
Thanks. I've got one or two questions on it. First, actually, on page 25, figure 2, on the long-term conditions, it doesn't seem to mention dementia, and I would have thought dementia was a fairly prevalent long-term condition suffered by people in Dumfries and Galloway. I just wondered why that wasn't showing on that particular graphic.
Thank you. Yes, you're quite right. Dementia is quite a feature for Dumfries and Galloway.
So, Councillor Murray, could you put your mic off?
Okay, so sorry. Thanks for that question. You're quite right. Dementia is very much a feature of health and social care across Dumfries and Galloway for the people here. The figure that you're... Sorry?
We've actually removed that particular diagram from the next version, the next iteration of the plan, because people didn't feel that it was representative of the breakdown of deaths, and we've replaced that.
Do you know where it came from, this diagram?
That was the, excuse me, I haven't got my reading glasses on, ISD, is it?
So it comes from Information Services Scotland, and it, you might recognise it from the Health and Social Care.
Scotland would actually raise issues with that, actually, because some of it is about dementia not being considered to be a health issue and being considered to be a social issue. So I think there's, I'm glad it's been taken out. The other, page 34, you mention a test for post-diagnostic support for dementia and a number of outcomes. I'm confused about what the test actually is. There doesn't seem to be much detail in the report about what this test is. This when the test that the community psychiatric nurse comes in to do? Or?
That section has also been amended following discussion with the department that did that that test of change. It was the dementia post-diagnostic support section has been reworded to make that more clear. Just to go back to your previous point, we have a new figure 1, which was from the National Record of Scotland, and dementia is included as a specific cause of death.
And my final point, and I think maybe others have a view on this as well, I felt there was, and I know it's not just down to the IGB, there's a much wider issue about this, but I felt there was no reference to dying with dignity, and I think actually that is, for a lot of people at the end of their life, their desire is to die with dignity, and it doesn't always happen. And I've just felt there wasn't the stress on that there ought to be.
Thank you. We'll take that back. Thanks for that.
I think I'm conscious there's still a few questions, but obviously the draft will be a changing document, as we're discovering. I think maybe if we take the questions that we have here today and then ensure that the paper comes back to us so we get we can see what's actually going to get presented, because obviously there's a few things that are still being clarified just now. So with that, Councillor John Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm just looking at page 25 again on long-term conditions. It's more of an observation that depression is number 4 on that list. And I would have thought Councillor Murray, when she mentioned dementia, that would have been well up on that list. The second point I was going to make was on page 27, which is the workforce. We understand that there's significant recruitment challenges in most of the health professions, social care professions, but it doesn't actually touch on how we're going to tackle that particular issue. Although I did notice that there is a specific link on page 53, which talks about the health and care staffing in Scotland, but a lot of these links, they tend to be big papers on their own. It takes a bit of reading to do, but I just wondered if you can help me out with that one.
Okay. Thank you. I think often in the how we're going to tackle some of those things comes after the plan, after that strategy, after that plan, with a more of an implementation plan. I think the key thing for us here is highlighting where that is, and I think within the Making It Happen section within the back, there will be some more strategic actions that we would take in order to do that. But it's a work in progress that will be about how we do that.
Councillor Maitland.
Chairman, I'm a little concerned that we've been told that there are going to be various changes made to this report, and I'm not absolutely sure that members can really inform us, as IJB members, about what they think about this report when it's not going to be the same one as actually presented to the IJB. I mean, while we're doing this, obviously, and we can pick through various points. I mean, on page 25 in figure 3, there isn't anything in figure 3, and I'm not certain whether I need to have the information that is there in order to understand the thing more clearly. figure 2, which members have already talked about, I don't know what this is really explaining to me. It talks about long-term conditions, but it doesn't tell me what people have actually died of. And so, I mean, should we, this is a plan for palliative care, looking at these figures here, cancer, which gets a tremendous amount of attention, is actually really, comparatively speaking, quite a small number. And I suspect there are people who have been given diagnoses for things probably which will carry them off, which it's not clear to me what level I ought to be taking as an IJB member of information about that. You know, all the neurological type diseases, people have talked about dementia. I need to have a little bit of help as to where I should be thinking about placing a particular emphasis and need, because there are different needs according to whatever what condition somebody's got. So I'm concerned that there's nothing in figure 3. I don't understand what figure 2 is telling me. I think somebody has very firmly, the leaders talked about dying with dignity, and of course there is the other issue, quite clearly here, which is not here, which is about choice and self-determination. When you choose to die. Now that I know is a difficult thing for people to think about, but I think we should not duck it. I think the IJB should be asked by us to consider that as well, that is something which we really need to put into the mix, that people should eventually have the choice as to when and how they die, because that, after all, is about dignity, self-determination. The other thing that I thought overall about this plan is that I'm not certain that I could take out of this plan what is actually going to happen with respect to our own people, our own staff. What are we asking them to do, particularly? Maybe the Chief Social Work Officer would help me with this. But there's a bit of a gap between what this is talking about, just in terms of identifying a problem, and what we would see on the ground, and what, as families and carers, we might expect to see in terms of changes of approach.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Maitland. There's quite a lot in there. I think, given that there's a changing draft in front of us, I was sort of hoping to head that off at the pass, so we just capture as much as we can today. I'm sure some of Councillor Maitland's earlier comments can be captured, especially with regards to dignity and self-determination, and some of the other points, and then I'll ask Chief Social Work Officer, maybe in terms of our own staff, the impact that has for us as a council, and how we might actually see those changes or intentions being affected. So if I let Lauren answer for that first, and then maybe can pick up on the other points about the draft itself.
Thank you, Chair. I think in terms of our own staff, clearly there's an ever-changing strategy in terms of how we deliver services, and we're currently working under the Health and Social Care Management team to look at the development of the home teams within each locality. Now that is a process that's currently being taken forward. There's some tests of change going on in terms of how we will deliver services differently and more effectively. I think in terms of the plan, obviously I wasn't aware that the paper within these committee papers was a draft that had subsequently been updated, so my apologies to members on that front. And I think what we need to do is take the comments that have already been made, and I'll obviously work with Liz and Viv to have those incorporated and made clearer as to the way forward and how the areas in which we would be looking for the IJB to consider. Just in terms of, Chair, if you wish, then my proposal would be that I ask the IJB to postpone the hearing of this paper until members have had a further opportunity to consult and give their views, given that there is some uncertainty both in the content of this draft report and also some of the questions that have been raised today.
Thank you, Lillian. And just in terms of the other points raised by Councillor Maitland.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. this is a draft document is out for consultation at the moment, and my understanding is that that's here to hear these views. So it is a kind of moving feast. It is not the final document that will be going forward there. And it's that kind of dilemma about how early do we share it with people for views, to make sure that we are picking up things that colleagues with very different experience to us have, in order to make sure we get that. So I think we've taken the view that bringing it to Social Work Committee early, we've maybe misjudged exactly how far we thought we were along that, which absolutely shows why it's important that we do engage with you early in the process, so that we don't get too far along without having taken account of committee's views. Very happy to have Councillor Maitland's comments and suggestions, as we are from anybody. We're happy to take anything by email or anything else around there from that, if colleagues have other suggestions that we can take. But yeah, it's an early. We've maybe come a bit early with it. It's not as far a final draft, but I think there's evidence that that's maybe been worthwhile, given that we're getting this feedback.
No, absolutely, and it's maybe good for us to have an input when it's still being shaped as well. It's obviously helpful at times. Councillor Dempster.
Thanks, Chair. Just an observation. If you look at page 35, the introduction of Scotland House of Care, and you go to the third bullet point, it says, promotes principles of self-management by adopting an asset-based approach to care and support. I'd be surprised if any layperson understood what that was. And I know it is shared by health professionals, and it's in health professionals' language, but I think when it gets to the public stage, and I know you've got in page 56 if you'd like some help understanding this, but if it's in plain English, maybe that would help, because the general public just don't grasp that kind of thing, and to be fair, they don't come forward. And the last thing, and I think Councillor Maitland touched on it anyway, I would have hoped in the back of the document somewhere that would be a sort of simple, in summary, the changes that might take place will be, so that folk can go to a brief assessment, and then on that basis can then go through the document and see where they might pick up, how they might be able to feed into that.
Thank you, Councillor. That's helpful. I absolutely agree with you in terms of us making the documents plain English, and we do try and do that through our editing process. So that's a bit of a shortcut there in that one. And take on board what you're taking, and I'll feed that back into the editorial group. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, many of the points have been made, but could I turn to page 21, and I hear Lillian say that there's a change in the draft. I'm looking at the timescale there, pre-consultation, April to November 2018, and you can read for yourself. And then it comes down to the bottom, the second last bullet point, co-development of final draft, December 2019. Could we just be given some indication of how far behind are we with this draft or the consultation in terms of the timescale? And if there is a new timescale, could we be provided with that? That would be my first point. My next point, and yes, palliative care, dignity, I think that must be away at the very top of anything that we do in terms of end of life for any individual. And I look through the whole document, and I only see one reference to hospice. Now, we in Stranraer, maybe we're fortunate in the sense that we've got 2 beds, palliative care beds. But, as I understand it, and I can be corrected, we don't have a hospice in Dumfries and Galloway. And I think I'll go as far as to say maybe that would be the only authority, maybe that does not have a hospice. Now, if we're going to look at anything, and we look here at on page 28, enable people to have more choice. And what choices are we giving them currently, and what is the objective in terms of what choices will be available to them? And I heard Jimmy talk about the house of care and so forth. If we are going to give people choice, I would hope that we are looking very seriously at some sort of, not some sort of hospice, but a hospice provision in Dumfries and Galloway. And I would much prefer it was in Stranraer, where we are very, very short of resources. I know it's not a debate on dementia. I'm pleased to hear Elaine mention dementia, because it's the one thing that west of the region we are very short in terms of beds and so forth, and I would welcome a debate on that one. But the document doesn't go far enough. And palliative, the 2 beds and the service that's provided is excellent, and the feedback is excellent. But, you know, it would be much better if it was hospice provision. Could we have this, you know, to the forefront as well, that we seriously consider hospice provision, and as I say, much better if it was in Stranraer.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I think in terms of the time frame, that is again is moving a little bit there. I think we've just heard from Chief Social Work Officer about postponing this, given where we are with that draft. I think with the in regard to hospice, I don't think through the plan we mentioned any particular service. This is about setting that high level strategic principle ways about what we'll do, rather than what service we might use to do that. So I would expect that to come through, but happy to take a look at that a bit further. And similarly, I think the points you make around the dignity and dementia, we've heard that very clearly here today, so we'll also take that back and review how we've included it in that plan. So thank you.
Councillor Scrobie, I will get a timeline for yourself and the rest of the committee members, which we'll circulate once we receive the updated timeline.
So do we have any other members wanting to contribute to this? Councillor Dougie Campbell. Yep.
Thanks, Chair. I'm interested in the section Building Compassionate Communities on page 34 of our reports. When I first read this, I thought, I'm not sure how I feel about that. There's a few questions come up, and I'm very much open-minded when it comes to intergenerational work between young people and elderly people, but actually for intergenerational approach to care for the elderly people who are dying. The work that's taking place in the Stewardship, is this a pilot with a view to extending it across the region? What measures will be in place for protecting children if this actually does come to fruition? And is this taken from best practice elsewhere, or is this something that's specific to Dumfries and Galloway? I suppose, but my main issue is, what protection is around young people who may, for the first time, be building a relationship with somebody who's going to die.
Thank you. Thanks for that question. I have to be honest and say I haven't got a huge amount of detail around that particular project in Stewardship, but happy to get it for you if that would be helpful. What I do know is that this is part of what's called True Canter, which is a national programme, so it is absolutely based on a principle that's around elsewhere. And these are all the sorts of questions that we would be expecting operational colleagues to be taken into place there. I personally have had some experience elsewhere across Scotland about where compassionate communities have been there, and they are very careful about looking after people who are involved in that from either a voluntary or for families or carers. So I would want to reassure you that will be around that, whilst I don't have the absolute detail of that pilot that's going on there. But it's part of a national programme that's being taken forward.
Councillor Maitland, did you want to come back in?
I did actually, because Councillor Campbell's mentioning about young people. This is totally anecdotal, and I do accept that you cannot make policy on the basis of one issue. But my experience is with the concerning the family death of my mother-in-law. The grandchildren were summoned because she was dying. And at the time, there was a falling out of provision, so somebody couldn't come in overnight. And the grandchildren took it in turns, in pairs, to sit up with her overnight. And it was the oldest to the youngest, paired up, and there were a lot of them, but they were aged between 10 and 28. And subsequent to that, they were asked whether they were willing to sit with my mother-in-law during the night in these 2-hour shifts, and they said to us subsequently, yes, we would, and we wanted to do it, and they said it was really important to them that they had taken that choice, they decided themselves, and that they had been there and participated. I think it's absolutely up to the individual. Nobody should be forced to do anything they don't want to do, but in terms of resilience and family cohesion and understanding and care and compassion, I think it's possible that young people actually are stronger than one maybe immediately thinks they are. So I do understand the caution that Councillor Campbell is suggesting, but my experience is that you don't need to worry too much in these particular cases. The other point I wanted to make, please, is about on page 20, which is talking about what do we mean by specialist palliative care. And the second paragraph is quite clear that it says that access to specialist palliative care should be available in all settings. And I'm totally with that. I think that's really important. But then the paper goes on to major on hospice beds, on the Alexandra unit. And I think that's actually something which certainly most people out there would want to be sure that that was not the case. They want to die at home. Many, many people want to die at home. And I think there's a figure, I think you're supposed to provide about 5.5 beds per 100,000 population. That's the rough figure, my understanding. And on that basis, actually, Stranraer's doing quite well, Councillor Scobie. The issue about it is that please could we be certain that we show how specialist palliative care can go into people's homes, how that is going to be provided, how families can be entirely sure that somebody will not die alone, that they will die supported, that they will die in no pain. That's what people want to know. They know that there's the Alexandra unit, but actually in many, many, many cases it's irrelevant. And so a plan here would be, for me, would be most important if it showed what was really going to happen in many, many cases, not the extreme cases of the Alexandra unit. Thank you.
Thank you. So, and it follows on probably from Councillor Dempster's point about ultimately this needs to be understood by most of the service users are going to either read the document or parts of the document that are relevant to them, how it's going to individually affect their particular needs and the carers' needs, etc. So, I mean, Councillor Maitland offered quite a lot there, and including sort of a personal slant in it. But I mean, can you take some of that on board?
Absolutely, absolutely we can. The in terms of if I take the specialist care first, that's describing what we have currently in Dumfries and Galloway in terms of that specialist care, and absolutely the point of this plan is to try and make sure that that's available to people where they choose to die and when and how they want to do that. So what we're trying to do is set out what we can do differently in order to meet those ambitions. So we need to make sure that that's coming clear through for people who are reading that for the first time. And very grateful to Councillor Maitland for sharing that personal experience around that from there. And I guess there's something for us to pull in that. We've got a lot of experience from people when we've been speaking to them about development of this plan, and it might be that some of those kind of things would be something that we could include going forward. So yeah, absolutely, we'll take those on board.
Thank you. I mean, before we sort of close this and sort of agree to what we're expecting to happen next, there's also the side which is like, how do we measure how well we're doing with whatever changes we make as well? So obviously we'll need to know, did we do it good? You know, can we do it better, and how? So so that has to be sort of built into the sort of framework somehow. In terms of what we're being asked to do, obviously we've considered and discussed the plan as was. Obviously that's maybe moved on a little bit, and I think there's clearly we want to see this again in a more sort of up-to-date, fully formed sort of way with a few of the details included. So I think, I mean, are we agreeing as a committee then to request that this comes back in the appropriate form? Now I don't know about the timelines. I don't know if that's something that we need to. Yeah. So Lillian's assured me that she can get that timeline detail. So we are agreeing that this will come back, maybe in a slightly more mature form, and then we'll be able to consider it and then have that final say before it goes to be determined at the IJB. Would that be fair? And of course, there's a few action points along the way where information is either being endeavoured to be shared by Lillian and or yourselves. You're available to be contacted if people are able to, make comments or through Chief Social Work Officer. So, okay, so we're happy to agree that? Okay, thank you. So item number 5 is a public protection review. We've got Gordon Patson here, who's able to take any questions on this. We've been asked to note the review process undertaken and also the revisions made to the public protection structure, which are all included in the report. I don't know if Gordon's want to add anything or if you just want to take questions from members.
Yeah, I can just add very briefly, this is a follow-up to a report and presentation that was tabled to yourselves back on 10th of May 2018, prior to the establishment of the revised structure. The revised structure brought together previously Adult Protection Committee, Child Protection Committee and Domestic Abuse Violence Against Women's Partnership under the Public Protection, a wider Public Protection Partnership, of which the Public Protection Committee is one of the main vehicles coming forward. We did have an obligation, as I stated previously, we had an obligation and a requirement to continuously review, which we have done over those sort of 18 months. And we identified obviously some positives where it's working well in terms of reducing silo working, and obviously some findings that we have implemented, taken forward and implemented, and tabled under obviously Chief Officers Group as well, in which the details of a restructure that we have implemented and slight revision of membership as well is included in the appendix. As well. So I'm happy to take any further questions.
Any members, any questions on the report? No. Evidently a very good and comprehensive report, so we're happy to note that and go forward to the next item. Thank you. Okay, that brings us on to the next item, which is the 6-month assessment from 1st of April 2019 to 30th September 2019 of Social Work Services Business Plan Performance. We have Gillian here to take any questions on the report. We've been asked to review the 6-month summary and scrutinise the exception reporting, so I don't know if there's anything you want to add, particularly at the moment, Gillian, or will I just throw it over to members?
There's nothing specifically to add to the content of the report, but I think for members' understanding, it would be useful for me to just briefly go through the 3 kind of main areas. First of all, there is the local government benchmarking data, which you'll be aware is embargoed and was just made available on the 31st of January. It doesn't reflect a 6-month position anyway, so it wouldn't actually be available in this committee cycle, but it will be available in the next end of year reporting period. Secondly, we have some in there that are not measured for half years or available from 2020. So again, it's a reflection of the fact that this is the first iteration of the new Social Work Services report. We have some new data that wasn't available to us previously, and in some instances we are actually still working with partners on looking at data that's got a little bit more meaning, and that needs to be developed. So that will come to you for the end of year reporting cycle as well. So absolutely appreciate that there are some gaps there for the data, but hopefully by the second iteration of this report, members will get a better understanding of the services we're delivering and the performance.
Councillor John Campbell.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks for that, because that was one of the things that I noticed, that the information wasn't available at the end of January. I just thought that maybe it's come to this committee just a bit too early, and maybe another committee would have been more suited. But thanks for filling us in for that detail.
Thank you, Councillor Murray.
I suppose mine is probably maybe more of a question for Lillian. We've had a lot of these reports come to different committees, and it's always the same problems every directorate has about PDRs, about sickness absence and so on. And at one point I think we did report to Policy and Resources sort of corporately. I'm just wondering whether that will come back, because I think we actually need to address these things corporately, because they are the same problems in each department in terms of, why does every department have problems with annual reviews and so on, and whether or not, for example, are the sickness targets actually realistic, because you don't want to be encouraging people to rush back to work as soon as they've stopped being sick with norovirus because they're still infectious. So, and they give it to everybody else. So, there are other things which I think are more maybe council-wide that we need to consider, rather than each department having to repeat the same issues that they've got around some of these matters.
Thank you, Leader, for that question. I just really, in terms of the PDRs, absolutely committed in the service to try and reach the target set for the completions of the PDRs, and we absolutely understand the importance of them. We've taken a couple of steps to try and address this issue. Some of that is around a changed, streamlined process for social work, because we are uniquely different in terms of meeting the professional outcomes and professional objectives for our registered social workers in particular. And we do have a range of staff within our service that almost have to have different targets within their PDRs for us to make sure that we have them supported to be able to deliver on their functions. What I would say, and I have many conversations with managers around this agenda, we have a significant increase in our workload for social work that members are aware of, and I have raised through a number of different forums. And some of the feedback has been quite honest and upfront from managers that say, if I'm sitting doing a PDR and an emergency comes in, then the PDR is the point that will stop and the emergency will be dealt with given the nature of our day-to-day service delivery. That is not an excuse, and we should never make excuses for not reaching the target. That is a fundamental issue for us just now in terms of capacity and meeting the demand of the statutory service. So we are looking to try and streamline the process as best as we can. We've looked at some protected time for managers to be able to do that, and some protected time for our staff to make sure, because the importance of the PDR allows us to make sure that we've got the appropriate training in place. So we fully understand the need for professional development. However, it is an area that is sometimes given less of a priority because the priority that's at the top is so crisis orientated given the nature of the business.
Thank you for that. Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, I know Lillian has started to answer the question I'm about to ask, but I'm looking at the exceptional report on page 86, and that's again on absence and so forth. And I think it's running at, what's almost 6 days, when it should be something in the region of 4.5. But it's not so much that, and I've said this at Joint Safety Committee, I've said it at each of the committees that I've been on, it's the cause and effect of that absence and how we're dealing with this. And some of us who were long-standing here will remember when we had the consultant up from London that looked at caseload and a social work's caseload, and I think it was running at that time above 100 per social worker, and the optimum was about to try and get that down to 60 and even down to 45 of a caseload. So I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at, if a social worker is running with so much caseload, how much stress this can cause, and if stress is part of that. Because I look at the action, and it's around mental health awareness and what's being done. But I'm just asking the question, what are the social workers working with in terms of caseload on average? And has that a contributory factor to cause and effect of the illness? It's to give more detail to some of these, and for us to understand the absence rate.
Thank you, Councillor Scobie. I'll try and answer all the points. You'll appreciate that some of the detail sometimes is an ever-changing picture for social workers. In terms of caseload management, that's an area that as a profession we've always struggled to be prescriptive, because one case can take up 40% of a worker's week, and somebody might hold 40 cases, but they're what would be classed as a lower level of input. So that's a more difficult one to answer. However, I would give you assurance that there are no social workers that hold 100 active cases. There may be social workers that hold cases in high numbers, but there are, for example, a review every year. So that would be it would be linked to them, but there's very little input. But there is no active cases then for a social worker that would hold over 100. That would be impossible to manage, quite frankly. So we have done quite a lot of work on trying to have a tariff of cases in terms of those very high-risk cases. And how many a worker would particularly hold. So if you've got, a child and families worker, they would very rarely hold any more than 3 or 4 child protection cases because of the required input and level of work around those. And in adult services, that would be similar in terms of adult support and protection or very high risk service users. And in justice, clearly, the very high risk sex offender cases would be minimised in terms of how many are allocated to each worker. So it's not an exact science, but that's the principles in which we would look to allocate and manage caseloads. If members would look at the detail of that particular absence and the lost absence, we've got 6 members of staff who are long-term absence for various reasons, because we've done a significant amount of work around the support that we offer to staff when indeed they go off work for whatever the reason, and particularly around the levels of stress that we have within our service. I have said this before, and I'll say it to members again, social work by the very profession is a stressful profession, and we deal with significant cases that can be really difficult for workers to deal with, both during the process and when those cases are closed. So we deal, by the very nature of our profession, we deal with the most vulnerable and the most difficult members sometimes of the communities. But we're trained to do that. That's our training and that's our profession. But it's our responsibility as managers to make sure that we have wraparound supports for all of our staff. We don't always get it right, but we absolutely have a commitment to making sure that staff have regular supervision, that managers are available, that we have team meetings, that we have a practice network where staff can get together to share best practice and also to share some of the challenges within the service. As a strategic team, we have at least twice a year, we go and visit every single team within the social work service to give workers an opportunity to share some of the concerns. And I absolutely have an open door policy which workers are aware of. They can come and speak to me at any point and raise any issues. Now I get they don't always do that, but I believe we have mechanisms for workers to raise these issues and seek support. I did also send to members a copy of the Unison survey on social workers across Scotland that they did. They did a massive full-scale survey, and if you read that survey, it's crystal clear that within the profession of social work, we deal with stress and we deal with crisis daily, which has an impact on our workers. It's our responsibility to support them.
Yeah, Chair, if I could. Yeah, and I'm pleased with what Lillian said, but I think we need to see it in here as a narrative that we are dealing with cause and effect. It's not just the stress on the recipients of the service; it's also within the staff. And I also note what she's saying. I referred to years back when caseload was running an average, of 100. Social workers were 100, and the optimum figure was 45. Accepting what you're saying, that some will be more difficult than others, and therefore that they will have less. But if it does run to, and we didn't get a figure on average of what a normal caseload is for a social worker, and I'm quite sure and it's non applying a science. It's just saying what's the average caseload for a social worker, and could this be cause and effect of the absenteeism? And I didn't get that.
I mean, I'll hand over to Lillian because she can give you a bit of detail. I think it probably is worth including a bit of extra narrative about the impact on staff with more detail. But I think from what Lillian just said, clearly, when you start asking about an average figure, it sort of makes very little sense given what she's just said about how there's a kind of risk matrix or tariff, if you like, in terms of how cases are maybe allocated depending on the severity or the risk of the case. So, but I'll hand over to you, Lillian.
I can't give you an average across the service, Councillor Scobie, but if you take children and families, for example, most of our social workers within children and families will be sitting with around 34 to 35 of a caseload on average. But we've got some children and family social workers that have got 3 because of the high nature and high risk. And so it would be impossible for me to say, but if you wanted me to give you an average, children and families would be round about that.
Thank you. Councillor Jane Maitland.
Thank you. When I read this, I was curious about the item on page 70, which was the percentage of children on the Child Protection Register for more than 36 weeks, with a value of 4 and a target of 25%. And I mean, there are other parts of these papers which do indicate that I shouldn't be too alarmed, but I wonder if we could have a little bit of narrative as to why there has been such a dip at that point, and whether it has actually been to do with resources given specifically in order to cope with child protection.
I mean, we did touch on this at a previous meeting, but Gillian, do you want to take that on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we look at the target from a national perspective. I think you're absolutely right. There does need to be some additional narrative in there. And I think what we can do with Lillian and our senior management team is look at some proxy data in there to actually underpin that, to make it more understandable. But absolutely take your point. There needs to be some more explanatory notes around that.
Could I just ask, I mean, is this to do with the Intensive Family Support Service? Is that what has made this change? Is it as simple as that? Because it's, I mean, reading the papers on agenda item 7 and actually arguably the previous item, we've got to keep an eye on this and understand why it's happening. And we're about to go into a budget process, and I think we need to think this one through.
There's absolutely no question that the intensive family support team had a major impact on some of our data and showed an absolute positive improvement for a significant amount of it. But we've also taken a huge amount of investment in our use of the signs of safety around children. And we're currently looking to see if we can use that. And it is a tool in a toolbox of many ways in which social workers intervene with children and families and those most vulnerable in our region. So we have changed their way of practice. It would be, members are absolutely aware of the impact of the increased demand for social work services. I think my last analysis was we were 54% up this year, again on last year, and members will be aware of the significant increase last year. So the demand for our service is continually growing, but we're trying to mitigate that by taking other ways in which we will try to practice, and the early intervention is absolutely the key. And clearly that team ceased functioning in September, so we're still trying to measure the impact, but the evaluation is crystal clear. That was a very positive way in which to engage and work with families, which we have looked to mitigate by the different ways in which we are introducing assessment tools and early intervention within our locality teams. Stephen unfortunately isn't here today because he's actually at a signs of safety training event, but we are also looking at the staff group across the region and whether we've got the resources in the correct place, because it is a changing demographic for us just in terms of the need for social workers in different parts of the region. So we are looking at it's not a restructure, but it's certainly a review of where we're having our teams based, and I will bring that back to members when that's concluded. So I know that's a bit long-winded, but hopefully that answered your question, Councillor Maitland.
Thank you. Councillor Dempster.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of observations. On page 72 and 73, people using social care services are safe from harm. We've got percentage of adults supported at home who agree that their service and support had an impact on improving and maintaining their quality of life. Percentage of adults who agree. Percentage of adults who agree. There's no space for the percentage of adults who don't agree. And I think that should be a balanced report. Not everybody will respond to a survey, but there must be a proportion, unless we're very fortunate, that are not satisfied. And it would be good if you knew what that was and what the trend might be, and if members were able to look at that and learn it. You know, there might be a variety of issues, but if there was a single type issue, it would give us comfort to know how that was being addressed. And the other thing is on page 76, and it's just a personal thing, it's on process indicators, percentage of community council inquiries. There is no value, no status, no trend, no information. It really shouldn't be presented to us because it doesn't do anything except gives a target. And it should only come, I think, when there's some information associated with it, whether that's 6 monthly or annually. And it would save officers time printing all this stuff out because it doesn't tell us anything. But they're just observations, it's not a complaint anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Dempster. Gillian, have you got anything to add on those two?
So just on your last point there, the community council inquiries, that is reflecting that there were none in that period. I suppose that's probably not as clear as it could be, so we can actually take that as an action point, but it is because there were none. So that was just for members' information. In terms of the previous question, the local government benchmarking framework, we do have representation to speak to them, but the framework is derived through a kind of a matrix, and it's done by survey. So we are only advised of those that do return. And unfortunately, that's the same with a lot of the surveys that come under the local government benchmarking. It is only representative of those that will respond to the survey.
I suppose then, just briefly, does that beg the question that of the survey, there were no people that were dissatisfied? Is that what you're telling me?
It only reflects the percentage who respond in that positive manner. Yep.
All right, okay. That's not very helpful, I don't think, because we don't learn where the issues are unless we're told. But thanks for that.
Thank you. Councillor Sloan.
Having technical problems, Chair, with you. I mean, there's nobody who'll disagree with Lillian's remark that social work is a high-pressure business now. I mean, the staff are under tremendous pressure. But in Scotland just now, with the government we've got, that remark applies to every member of staff in Dumfries and Galloway and every elected member. I look at the responses to the MSPs and MPs are all well and good. But what I'm really interested in is the responses to the members. And I happen to know that recently a colleague of mine got a couple of responses through EMES or through social work anyway, that were one-liners, and that was to satisfy him. I know he has taken this up with the correct officer. I'm sure it'll be resolved by now. But that's, when you look for an answer, you look for a quality answer. One that informs the people that ask us a question. Not just giving us more questions.
Thanks, Councillor Sloan, for that question and comment. Absolutely, if members are requesting information from staff and through the UMES, then if it's not appropriately provided, then that should be escalated to either her or Stephen or myself, and we will deal with that and make sure that members are given the appropriate action. That's not acceptable.
Okay. Councillor Lever.
It's just a general observation on the exception reports. I think it would be useful if we had the values for previous half years as well, so we can actually observe the trend, whether it's coming down or whether it's going up. So obviously we do have the facility to do that, and I think it would be useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Members will appreciate that because it's the first iteration of this report, some of the data was never disaggregated for social work specifically, so this is new. So in your next 6-month report, you'll absolutely have that trend. Yep.
Okay, members, I think that's... Oh, sorry, Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, it's just coming in on a point, and I'm looking at page 73. Percentage adults supported at home who agreed that they are supported in living as independent as possible, not measured for half years. Percentage adults supported at home who agreed that they have a say in how their help, care and support was provided. There is an issue in Stranraer in terms of the number of AMI beds that are available. The care homes that provide that, and yet there's not a nursing care home, and people are being diverted away from the 30-mile guidelines and so forth. I make that point, Chair, in that I think from a reporting point of view in updates, I think there should be something in here that we can measure how many people are being placed well beyond the government guidelines, the Scottish Government guidelines of 30 miles, who are not being cared at home and not within the community under outcomes 1 and 2 that Elaine brought to my attention. It's really what's not in the report in terms of dementia and so forth, and how many people are well beyond being cared for at home or within the communities, and the effect that has on family.
Okay, so I mean, obviously we're looking at the report in front of us. This relates to percentage of adults supported at home. So yeah, so this is our business plan. This is our business plan. We've agreed it. Full council's agreed it. So I mean, there's maybe elements of information that might be better served through other vehicles, such as the Health and Social Care Partnership. I don't know, Lillian, if you want to maybe add a couple of qualifying words to that.
Councillor Scobie, this report is linked purely to social work services business plan, but I'm certainly happy to take back to the Health and Social Care Management team, and obviously there's the IJB yearly report that provides that performance, but I'm happy to take back if you feel there should be more detail.
Yeah, Chair, I think there should be more detail because it's not measured for the half year. We're not seeing the actual figures and how they're managed in here, and that's people at home. Mine is slightly going further than that, and I have requested the figures and not been provided, so I think if Lillian would take that back so that we can. Previous report talks about the number of deaths in the region, number of people in care homes, so the information is there, and it's how we present it.
Councillor Scobie, just to be clear, this reporting will come alongside social work business, so we wouldn't be reporting your request via social work committee. That would go through to the Health and Social Care Management team, which I will take and raise, because this performance report is linked to our business plan, which has been agreed at this committee and full council. Thank you.
Okay, I don't have any other members on the list for questions, so if we go to recommendations, 2.1, review a 6-month summary of performance. Do you think we've done that? Yep, thank you. And 2.2 is to scrutinise the exception report, which I think we've done. Are we happy to agree that we've done that? Okay, thank you very much. So item 7 is the minute of the Dumfries and Galloway Public Protection Committee. Are we happy to note that? Thank you. I was so eager for another item there to keep going. That's it. No more business, members. Thank you for your input and attendance today, and you're free to go. Thank you.